Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Monday edition of Moohead Radio. I'm your host, a big and furry bovine. Still not 100%, but getting there. Good enough to do a show, don't you think? A little bit later in the program, not much later, I'm going to reveal a different way of doing the program during the course of football season. Historically, we've done, the Pick'em League, and Fridays are a Pick'em League show. All that's going to change because of the circumstances of the Cleveland Browns and the fact that I think they actually have a chance to get better this year. And as a result, I want to use Fridays to be more analytical. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Today's program is, I was on Twitter asking Browns reporters a simple question. And the question was, why do you refuse to report on or call out Hugh Jackson for his inconsistencies? And not a one of them answered. Greg Brenda, Mary Kay Cabbagehead, you name it. I went down the line to all the people who were claiming to be Browns reporters, and none of them even so much as responded. So I think that it's important that in this era of fake news, that I differentiate fake news from no news and headless horsemen not reporting stories. It goes all the way back to 14 years when I started this program. And there are a lot of new viewers who come along and on board who don't have the running history of the program. And it's changed quite a bit over the years, to be sure. But at the heart of it was that I did not want to be beholden to anybody on a financial level. And on the few occasions where I actually appeared on, internet networks that were broadcast networks, I was not compensated. I always controlled my own live stream. I always ran a live feed on my homepage. Now we do it on YouTube and the homepage. But even when I was with DSN back in those days, and before that, when I was doing other networks, this program has always been independent. And I believe that you can't be a credible source if you don't, if you owe somebody something, or if you're beholden to somebody, you're never really going to be able to be upfront. I think that's what we have in Cleveland. I think we have a bunch of people who are on the broadcast end, who are wannabe personalities, who want to try to get attention by doing foolish things, saying foolish things, having an act of being ridiculously narrow or ridiculously negative or a homer or whatever. I think that there's a lot of that. But nobody who's really reporting, nobody who's picking out inconsistencies about what is happening with the team. And believe me, when I say I want Hugh Jackson fired, I'm dead serious. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. We could save a lot of time and a lot of losses by getting rid of him now. I'm going to explain why. Everybody made such a big deal of the Hard Knocks program. And the thing that was brought up most often in terms of the Hard Knocks program was the disagreement between Todd Haley and Hugh Jackson. Obviously, Haley took the position that, hey, we got to get tougher. We got to get guys practicing. And if you're healthy, you have to practice. There are no days off when you're as far behind as we are. And if we're ever going to get an edge to us and a toughness about us, we have to have all of our players on the field working together and practicing every minute that they can. That pretty well summarizes what Todd Haley said. Hugh Jackson, to summarize his position, I'm in charge here. I used to do your job at one time. I thought the same way you did, but now that I'm sitting on this higher level than you are, I see it differently. And it's more important that we manage our players through the preseason so that we don't end up with threatening injuries that take place in the preseason, especially soft tissue injuries that become worse things that make us lose what little talent we have that would challenge our depth. It's not that I have, a big disagreement. I mean, you can make an argument that what Hugh Jackson refers to as a scientific basis, which is the Joe Thomas, how do we keep him healthy during preseason so that we can get the best out of him during the regular season? How do we apply that toward our different athletes so that when the regular season begins, our best athletes are on the field, as opposed to working them, the Vikings would work the rowers underneath the ship and get somebody injured and unable to perform and forcing us to go into depth that we don't have on the roster. I could make an equal argument. That isn't really germane. Who's right and who's wrong? It's not germane. It's who's consistent and who's inconsistent that makes a difference to me. And Hugh Jackson is completely inconsistent. On the one hand, he's saying, we got to rest people because, especially in our positions of need where we're not particularly deep, we need to protect ourselves. That would be quarterback, because we're going to have one experienced quarterback. I don't count Drew Stanton. He's not really up to playing. Baker Mayfield's not ready yet. Tyrod Taylor's the guy we got. I would say the same thing is largely true with running backs. Duke Johnson is somebody you could ill afford to lose as a threat out of the backfield and catching passes. I would say that wide receiver would probably be singularly the greatest threat because we don't know if we have Josh Gordon. We know we have Jarvis Landry, but we can't afford to lose him, right? We traded Corey Coleman, so we're thin. We have Rashard Higgins. We're thin at wide receiver. We were to begin with, and we can't afford to lose what we have. So that would be like the greatest position of need that we would need to protect. And based upon what Hugh Jackson said on Hard Knocks, that should be the case. But you see, then he turns around and does something 180, something that is totally inconsistent. And if you haven't read the news, I'm sure you have at this point. If you haven't, God help you, you should learn how to read. Jackson revealed, and I'm reading this so that you understand, from Cleveland.com that makes mention of this. Jackson revealed that he kept Callaway in the Giants game into the fourth quarter long after the other starters were resting as punishment for being caught with a small amount of marijuana and a suspended driver's license last week. Now, his driver's license was not suspended. That's not true. So that's a misreporting. And a small amount of marijuana, we don't have results as to whether it was ingested in his system or not. All right, this is what Hugh Jackson said. Either you sit him or make him play. I thought it was better to make him play as long as he could. There were a couple of times he kept waving to come out, and we said, no, stay in. All right? He proudly announced that to the press. The video of it all over the internet. How does this jive with the notion that you want to protect your position of weakness? Callaway did what he was supposed to do. He got off to a slow start, dropped a few balls, but then after that, man, made a great sideline catch, a 54-yard touchdown pass. And if it were a normal situation predicated on what Hugh said prior to the game being played, Callaway would never have been in the game into the fourth quarter. And sure enough, he sustained a rib injury during the course of staying in through the fourth quarter and did not practice on Sunday as a result of it. Now, when a guy on one hand says, I'm all for protecting players, and then he brings the young guy out and forces him to play far too much too soon that leads to a slight injury, and he defends it by saying it's punishment, I have a twofold problem. And the twofold problem, what the hell happened there? It's like something just went bang. Okay. Wow. A little feedback. Twofold. One, as I just mentioned, it is a 180 on what he said. But the other thing is this notion of, so hard work is equated to punishment. And I'm really confused because Todd Haley believes that hard work is equated to better result, winning more. And Hugh Jackson believes that hard work is punishment, that the way we punish somebody is make them play harder. That's punishment? That sounds like if you get along with the head coach and you don't cause him any grief or the team any grief, you don't have to work hard, and therefore you end up with guys like Dwayne Bowe. You end up with guys who don't even try. You end up with Isaiah Crowell just kind of loafing along. You end up with a litany of players, Corey Coleman, stay on the good side of the coach and just basically loaf along. Punishment. Hard for me to wrap my head around a concept of making a guy play more being a source of punishment. You know, they played Johnny Manziel and it didn't punish him. He was an addict and he remained an addict. It didn't address the problem. Playing somebody, not playing somebody, how does that equate to punishment? All it does is it puts into the player's head that if you do something that embarrasses Hugh Jackson, he's going to make you work harder. So we better avoid that. We wonder why the Cleveland Browns are the way they are. We wonder why every year they come out and they don't move fast enough. They don't play hard enough. They don't look like they're clawing for their last breath. They just look like somebody who's just going through the motions. And we wonder why. How could it be that we have different players every year? The roster keeps turning over, but we keep getting the same lousy effort out of players. And this is why. It's why Hugh Jackson should never be here in the first place, because he's 1-31. He's why we're 1-31, folks. I guarantee you we would not be 1-31 if we had a coach who made these players play hard and made them accountable. Punishment. These are grown men. And I know you're going to say Callaway's 21 years old, but they're grown men. Punishment? Really? I mean, you're looking at punishing Josh Gordon, who has what? A problem. Johnny Manziel, a problem. Is there a way to punish an addict? No, I don't think so. I don't believe there is. But be that as it may, good old Way goes on doing his stupid thing. And the reporters won't ask the question, hey, Hugh, why did you say this on HBO and then turn around and do this? Why'd that happen? Nobody will hold him accountable because they don't want to cross the organization, because they're beholden to the organization. I'm not. I tell everybody the honest truth, the honest goddamn truth. If I were allowed to question the head coach in a press conference after the game, I would be asking him these things. And I know they'd throw me out and they'd never invite me back again. But just to get the one question in, so that Hugh Jackson was forced to have to answer why he took two diametrically opposed positions within days and how he justifies that. It to me is, it's why any hope that I have for this season begins when he's gone. You're never going to get Myles Garrett to become half the pass rusher that he can be when Hugh does what he does, when he coddles players. I would go as far as saying that it may already be ruined for Myles Garrett because he came in to the Browns as kind of a future star. He was hurt and he didn't play. He only played 11 games. He wasn't seeing the field, but only on third down in a lot of those games. Do you think that teaches him to be hungry? Do you think that makes him a better football player? I hear all the talk coming out of his mouth. Oh, now that LeBron's gone, maybe I can step up. I hear the talk, but I don't see the walk. Not from any of these guys. And I want to see Denzel Ward. I want to see these people go out and hit. But it's really hard to do when you have a homicidal defensive coordinator who really wants you to get after people and a head coach who just wants to control you. It's a bad situation. And I think it's going to end up just as lousy in its own way as last year was, as the last 2 years have been. It's underachievement more than anything. That's the word. They consistently underachieve. Now, I can say this. The guys who are usually with me, I don't know where they are today. So I'm just going on doing this my old school way. I wanted to point out a change in the way we're going to be doing things on Moohead Radio. It's broadcast Monday and Friday shows during the football season. I am doing away with the Pick'em League. I think that I dedicated far too much foolish time with the idea and Friday shows being, Pick'em kind of things. And it got off the track of what the show should be about. This is the year that the Cleveland Browns have to make a step to make themselves better. And I really want to be more analytical. All right. Like I am on Mondays. Halftime and post-game shows are great because they're emotional, they're raw, they're immediate. Mondays are good because it's after the fact analytical. I want to be before the fact analytical too, to really try to figure out what's going to happen in a game before it happens. I think that it will make for a more interesting broadcast week as we go into football season, knowing that every Friday there will be in-depth discussion of the Cleveland game. I may also talk about our rivals in our division, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, and I'll be talking about that. But really with the focus on the Browns games. And I'm not going to worry about all this nonsense of who won an imaginary league or any of this type of thing. I really want to focus on what's happening with the team and analytically what I would do differently as we go week to week, because I know there's going to be a ton of disagreement between myself and Hugh Jackson. This I'm sure of. As far as the reporters in Cleveland, Ohio, look, you're not going to get any of the Indians reporters to address the issue of why Yandy Diaz keeps coming up and hitting and is successful when they bring him up, but he can't get on the field. And, that we have a 38-year-old Melky Cabrera who really is known for not playing any defense whatsoever, and his hitting has diminished. And he's getting time out there. Brandon Geyer, who can't hit right-handed pitching, and he's not a great fielder. He's getting playing time. And they want to hold Yandy Diaz to, well, he doesn't have a position. Like Geyer's playing center field sometimes. Geyer can't play center field any more than Melky can play right field, right? Doesn't stop them from getting playing time. These guys are old and they can't hit. Yet Diaz just keeps roping the ball and they won't let him play. Meanwhile, the only discussion they've had about Jason Kipnis is whether he was going to play second or whether he was going to play center field, if you can believe that. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I don't know. The Indians have a tendency far too often to score too few runs. They'll have a game like the other day where they'll score 9 runs, and then all of a sudden they'll come back and they'll play a guy who is, Homer Bailey, who's 1-9 this year, 1-6, I think, this year with the Reds, and he'll shut the Indians down. And of course, we have to hit our pitcher, so we don't have a DH, so Diaz won't be playing. Instead, we're stuck with Kipnis again, who does nothing but pop out. And will any reporter write about it? No. Will they ask the question? No. They'll just say, nah, there's really not a position for Diaz. And they'll just parrot the company line. It's like this in all the sports in Cleveland. It's the way it's always been. Except for the Cavaliers guys who were unduly negative and are probably reveling in the fact that LeBron's gone and all that. They're probably just thrilled to death. 21 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. You've got it tuned in to Moohead Radio. It just wouldn't be Hugh Jackson without this. He wasn't pleased with the tempo in practice on Sunday. We have to go faster. Sounds like Ty Lue. We have to play faster. When the offense plays fast, it makes the defense play fast. The defense has to get down in their stance to beat the offense to their stance. I mean, why are you saying this to the press? This is very simple. If you drove your players, they wouldn't be doing this. And then there's this comment. There's a time when you play methodical, when you're going to line up and smash the other team, and you're better than they are. But that's not who we are. So we have to play with tempo at all times. So in other words, we're forced into a hurry-up offense because we're not good enough. Now, that sounds like a teenage girl laced with insecurities to me. Girl's afraid she's not going to get asked to the dance. Well, I may be smart, but I have to just kind of acknowledge and admit what I am and what I'm not. And I'm not as pretty as Becky Lynn. And Becky Lynn is going to get multiple invites to the dance. And I'm likely, if I get asked out by the frog dissecting nerd in biology class, I guess I'll have to say yes, because I guess that's who I am. It's real motivational stuff. It's real fiery stuff, isn't it? It's the stuff of, we have to go into confusion mode on the offense because the only way we're going to beat anybody is by tricking them. And the reason is we don't practice hard enough. You think we don't have a problem? Just watch it happen. Is there a problem with Todd Haley and Hugh Jackson? Yeah, you bet there's a problem. They didn't choose one another. It would be one thing if our head coach chose his assistants or if the general manager chose his head coach, but they didn't. This is a problem, and it will continue to be a problem. You can just bet on that. Meanwhile, they just keep saying Tyrod Taylor's the guy. He's the guy. He's the guy. He's the guy. And so it should be. That's fine. Everybody wants the rookie to play because I think most people think that Tyrod Taylor isn't going to be long playing for Hugh Jackson in Cleveland. And we're going to have a new coach next year. So it might as well be the rookie who plays the following year, not Tyrod having to learn a whole new system all over again for a team that has a losing record. That's kind of the way I look at it. And I do believe that there is a chance that the Browns can really get better this year. It's just got to be without Hugh. If we, and I'm not a person who believes, and that, reading about another college player, Maryland, collapsing on the field and dying during workouts in an indoor facility that was too hot. Kids who aren't being paid a damn thing to play Division I football and they die. And it's not just happening, this is the first time it's happened in 10, 15 years. No, It's happening every year. Every year I read one of these stories or two of how, they seem to think for some reason that if they leave enough water out, like you'll do for a cow or a horse, the guys will drink it and they'll be okay, and you can work them that way. And there is such a lack of understanding. In an indoor facility with inadequate ventilation, it should never happen. I became severely dehydrated playing a 3.5-hour tennis match in an indoor facility that was insufficiently ventilated. And I ended up having a seizure that night. I am dead serious about this shit. And, the assistants who were involved in this at the University of Maryland, these people, they're on administrative leave. Ooh. Well, thanks so much for that. Administrative leave. Kid's dead. 19-year-old kid's dead. Maybe we'll punish those guys, and maybe we, can't bring them back to life, but, can't afford to lose our conditioning coach. So believe me, I'm not a guy who's going to say, we just got to work these people like slaves. That's not my mentality. But when you have 11 men on the field and you have to move in synchronicity, you better be practicing those 11 men and their immediate backups forcefully and rigorously during the preseason. It's really pointless for a young 19-year-old man to die doing wind sprints, something that don't make him a better football player. Another one of Hugh Jackson's concepts of punishment. It's like fraternity hazing. The rite of passage is you have to go through two-a-days. Hey, Chad, how you doing? Nice to see WRX Chad in the chat room. It's practice. It's what the Cavaliers didn't do because they had to protect an aging roster. And it showed all season long. Cavaliers not practicing, and as a result, looking ragged, turning the ball over. And they never really found that cohesion that they needed. And worse yet, LeBron ends up leaving and turning the whole thing inside out anyway. And so all the chemistry that they would have developed by practicing would have been gone anyway. You have to practice hard together. I don't mean like Robbie Benson in one-on-one being forced by the coach to run stairs endlessly. It is execution of plays. Football's holding your blocks long enough. It's the quarterback learning to go through his progressions and to know where his receivers are on the field. For the defensive lineman, it's being able to efficiently run stunts and to have hand techniques to get to the quarterback and to get into the backfield to stop the running game. For our defensive secondary, it's technique. It's also hand technique. It's being able to guide receivers into the part of the field where you want them to be. For our offensive line, it's picking up the other team's stunts. It's communication. It's the center really being able to say, hey, this is how we're lining up, and this is the blocking scheme we're going to use. Yeah, I know, Crazy Dog. Thanks for jumping in. Leonis Martin had a life-threatening bacterial infection, and this is something that just came up before I went on the air. And we will talk about that, right now. We were all trying to guess what it was, and we still don't know exactly what it is. But there are bacteria that are, and I don't know what bacteria they've isolated and how he caught it and where he caught it. But, the fact that he came to Cleveland and caught it, I remember who was the Browns football player? Was it Juravicius, who ended up with a life-threatening staph infection because he scratched something on something in the locker room? Am I remembering this right? And that spelled the end of Juravicius's career? Yeah, I know LaCharles was another one, but the one that stood out to me was that Juravicius actually caught this in the Browns facility by scraping up against something. That was at least the belief. And he did sue the team. That's right, Crazy Dog. And it makes me wonder about Leonis Martin, whether if there is something unlucky that happened to him, or if it's something specific that was environmental that is inside the Cleveland clubhouse. But it certainly can't make anybody feel particularly well. And I'm not hearing stories about them swabbing the decks, but quite honestly, if you have something that is like like MRSA is in hospitals, like there are MRSA infections that are extremely rapidly developing and can reproduce so quickly that like overnight. And if you don't get in with immediate large quantities of the correct antibiotic administered intravenously, then you're a goner, because it reaches a certain point and you hit what is called sepsis. And that is when your blood becomes totally infected and it sends out the infection all different distant organs in your body, and you have systemic shutdown. The only thing that was stated about Leonis Martin was that in internal organs of his body, the belief is that it was in multiple organs of his body and it spread that far. So obviously, from the time that he got ill to the time that they got him into the hospital, I mean, this thing was a fast moving infection. Nobody's saying what it is. We wish him well. But I certainly think somebody should be looking into this, because it is a scary thing, very scary thing. As far as Tiger Woods, I know I'm jumping around, but I watched, all 4 rounds of the PGA, and I'm actually seeing headlines, Tiger is, proud of finishing second. And, well, I would be too if I were him. Boy, did he play a magnificent final round. He couldn't drive the ball into the fairway to save his soul. And he still scrambled to a final round 64. And if you really look at how it all broke down, his third round, 17th hole, where he missed a 4-foot putt that would have dropped him one down further. He missed a 4-foot birdie putt. Instead of being one behind at 13 under when Koepka was at 14 under, he'd have been 14 under and tied. You don't know, with all the people yelling and screaming behind him, or ahead of him, what Koepka would have done if it ever reached the point where Tiger got ahead of him by a stroke. Koepka kept his head, though, and he did a great job. But Tiger Woods played a great final round, and I know that that's the reason why he was happy. I know that how hard it is to play the way that Tiger played, forced to play, I want to say 29 holes in one day because of rain delay in the third round. Playing 29 holes and having all this changes of shirts and hot, humid weather, having the back difficulties, the history of knee problems that he's had, it had to have been pretty well exhausting and torturous for him. But when he made that final putt on the 18th hole to secure second, it was proof that he did not screw up in the final round. He didn't fade. He didn't do what people said that he had done in his previous attempt at the Open, where he got actually to a point where he was even, and then the wheels came off after the 11th hole. It didn't happen this time. And I know that for Tiger and the way he thinks, he had a number in mind. And in order to have won that tournament, in his mind, he figured the only chance I have is if I shoot this number. And if that number had to have been like a 64, because nobody goes out and says, I'm going to shoot a 62. You shoot a 64 and another guy collapses, you win the tournament. And we watched other players collapse. We watched Justin Thomas have a shot at it and collapse. God, we watched Rory McIlroy fall apart. We watched Ricky Fowler fall apart. But Tiger Woods stayed strong through the end. And that's why he was happy, because he knows that he gave the best effort that he had. It wasn't good enough to beat Brooks Koepka. It wasn't good enough. Koepka now has won what? I want to say 3 or 4 majors in the last couple of years. He's a big, strong, strapping fellow who drives the ball 340 yards straight as an arrow. And he was able to do what Tiger was able to do for the majority of his career, which is to establish a lead going into the 4th round and just be able to manage the course and not fuck up. He hit birdies when he needed to. He kept the ball in play when he needed to. He took no unnecessary chances. And with his depth, the length off the tee, he was able to do that. But winning isn't everything, and I know Greg Brinda, who is really incurring my wrath and ire, so I've just stopped looking at what he says on Twitter, just get rid of him. I think the way he looked at it was, Koepka got the trophy and Tiger got a hug. And Greg Brinda, do your job. Shut the fuck up and do your job. Nobody cares about that kind of foolishness. When you get to a point in your life where you feel that you're physically disabled and that everybody says you're finished, you're done, you're never going to win another tournament for the rest of your life, or you're never going to accomplish whatever for the rest of your life, and you fight back to the degree that Tiger Woods had, and I'm not saying Tiger Woods is a perfect guy. God only knows he's got his share of problems. And that's all part of the deal, isn't it? I mean, the Ambien haze that he was in when he wrecked his car, his failed marriage, his overexertion into knee injuries, his overzealousness in training, his nasty kind of demeanor from his ex-caddy to his own kind of snappish behavior at the press. All of these things are part of his history. And he's never going to be able to change what he did when he was younger. But let's appreciate the effort that this guy has put in the last 2 years, from not being able to walk to being within 2 strokes of winning a major tournament. I think it's phenomenal. And it made for great theater, and that's kind of what sports is supposed to be. When I talk about how much I loved the Olympics back when the Olympics were really the Olympics with amateur athletes, and it was the drama, it was the theater, the spectacle of men who had 4 years to prepare for one moment in the sun. And it's watching the athletes knowing that if they don't get it right this time, there's no guarantee they're ever going to get a chance on that stage to do it again. There are some people who are so talented they go to multiple Olympics, but there are some people who only get it together for one Olympics, and that's their shining moment. And can they do it? Once every 4 years, can you do it? That's the theater. That's what makes sports, the 1980 hockey team. That's what makes for special memories in sports. It's not the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl again. It's not the Golden State Warriors with the championship again. It's not LeBron James in the finals again. It's the notion that somebody who's been given up on has that one last moment in the sun and that you watched it and it's inspiring. You know, Chad, it's because you've gotten used to a world of negativity. And it's not, it's not a rant about Tiger. It's about what I think athletics are supposed to be. I mean, I don't usually sit and watch golf tournaments on television, but it was compelling. More so than I could say about the NBA, which isn't compelling at all. And with the rule changes in football and the goofy owners and all the politics involved, not much I can say about that either. And baseball, the sheer boredom of watching 3-hour games and teams with 200 million plus payrolls. I don't know. I guess I like to be surprised every now and then. I don't know. Call me hokey. One great quote, D'Antoni, Melo will be a better fit with the Rockets than the Knicks. Ooh. Where has Melo been a good fit to begin with? Somebody just... I'm looking for proof. And if there's no proof, there used to be a time in the NBA when you could grab a player, you remember when Nate Thurman came to the Cavaliers back in their 76 Miracle of Richfield season, and Nate the Great would give him, 15, 16 minutes off the bench. There was a time when athletes knew that it was the end of their careers and they were willing to contribute. Antoine Walker would have been a real example of that with the Miami Heat. Guy who got himself into condition, got his shit together, and played a valuable 6-man role, Today's athlete isn't wired that way. Melo still thinks he's a superstar. Melo still thinks that he's talked about in the same breath like he was coming out of Syracuse when he and LeBron were in the draft together. That's what he thinks. It's wrong. He still wants a certain number of shots and a certain amount of offense run around him, and he's not that good. Just like Isaiah Thomas. He's only playing for who he's playing so that he can end up getting a contract to become a starter and take 25 to 30 shots a game again. That's the problem. The athlete doesn't fit the role. And, I saw that Dwayne Wade has turned China down. Well, I can understand that. So he's either going to come back to Miami, praise be God, or retire. Let's hope so. But even D. Wade didn't want to come off the bench. All right? And he was clearly not somebody who could play long minutes of basketball and play hard week in, week out. Melo is not a better fit with anybody. I wouldn't want to have anything to do with them. The Indians play tonight at the Great American Field in Cincinnati against the Reds. We had problems with them before. We'll see if we have problems with them again. I'm going to be watching the game for lack of anything better to do. Everybody, I've done my thing today. 45 minutes of Moohead, and I'm out of here. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this edition of Moohead Radio. Be back again on Friday, and we'll be taking a closer look at what's going on with the Cleveland Browns then. Thanks for watching, and until Friday, hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.